Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Food4Media's latest webinar in the Food4Media Meet series. I've got another amazing lineup of panelists today for today's session entitled, What Do Food and Drink Writers Want? We've got a fantastic hour ahead, and that's all due to a star-studded lineup of panelists, and I'm going to introduce them now. I should introduce myself first. Henry Hemming, Managing Director of Food4Media. Forgot to do that. To introduce my panelists so they can give you a wave at the beginning of the session. They are Tim Haywood. Tim, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. We've got Sue Quinn.
Hi.
Morning, Sue. We've got Ali Head. Hi, Ali. Lovely to have you with us. And last but certainly not least, we've got Stacey Smith. Stacey, it's wonderful to have you with us. Okay, so we have billed this as a pulsating 1-hour session with UK top food and drink writers. Well, we've delivered the writers, so now we have to make it pulsate. No easy task. I will just say we had a property for media webinar earlier this week with Jane Doyle, who does a lot of writing for the Times, and she said she describes the experience like a rerun of her wedding. She can't remember a thing she said, and she certainly can't remember who was there. So today we have almost 150 people and companies registered. We've got brands such as Coffee and Kin, Good Egg, Halgarten Wines, Riverford, Mandira's Kitchen, and we've got any number of food PR agencies. It's wonderful to have you all here with us today. The likes of Raw and Nudge and Samphire and Brand Dialogue and Wildcard and so many more. So wonderful to have you in the room with us. Do start thinking at this stage about your questions. I've got quite a few questions in advance. I did get one answer in advance. I'm just going to quickly read this now. This is from the inimitable Rupert Ponsonby of R&R Teamwork. I asked Rupert for a question, but in his delightful style, he decided to give me an answer. So this is a man who's in love with his hops and his wife and his pig, Boudica, in that order, I hasten to add. I said, do you have a question? He replied, what do food and drink writers want, says he. A short subject line, which tells it like it is. No exclusive, unique, nor unqualified sustainable. The word invitation only if it is. Something new, something timely. Now at this point, Rupert starts to wander. A PA and a chauffeur. A receptive, hideously rich and unquestioning commissioning editor.
Yeah.
Or a glass of sparkling Gosnell's London mead. Gosnell's mead for those in need. Well, thank you, Rupert. You really ought to be in PR. That's absolutely marvelous. So do start thinking about some genuine questions from the audience, please. That would be lovely. I'm just going to finally say it's in what has been a really, really difficult year for everyone. And I do think one of the purposes of these webinars is just to bring us all together and put a smile on everyone's face. I've got to say, we've had a very good year at Food4Media. It's the real phoenix from the ashes story. On just about every count, we're going to be 100% up this year. 100% more journalists using the site, PRs, and the number of journalist alerts. I think we're going to do 200 journalist alerts in the month of October. And so I just want to thank David Ash and Becky Greenwell, especially, who is our content editor. She's the one who goes out and talks to journalists and find out what they're writing about. I also hope that before long, we will be able to announce a Food4Media event, because I think that's going to be very much on the card once our lives return to normality. If you're feeling social, we love your Instagram stories and your tweets. Please post something, hashtag Food4Media Meets. And if you could include our panelists and Food4Media in your output, that'd be lovely. Bring a smile to everyone's faces. I think we can now get to today's event, and I can shut up. So we're going to ask each of our panelists to talk to you for about 5 minutes about their world, who they write for, what works with them, what doesn't work, what grates, what PR tactics tend to create some sort of cut through with them, and what entirely leaves them stone cold. And then once we've talked to each of the panelists, we'll then take the questions from the audience. And I have got the intrepid Sue Quinn has offered to go first. Thank you very much indeed, Sue.
Okay, I'm not sure I can promise to be pulsating, but I'll give it a whirl. I mean, I guess first up, introduce myself. My name is Sue Quinn. I'm a freelance food writer, and I also write cookbooks. But for the purposes of this episode, I guess I'm a food writer. I trained as a journalist in Australia as a newspaper reporter, and at one point I was a political writer. And then when I came over here, I was a home news reporter on The Guardian for a while. So a lot of the pieces I write are kind of highly researched, and they're not investigative in the deeper sense of the word, but they do require quite a bit of research. My main customers, I guess, at the moment, I write a lot for The Telegraph, the food pages in The Telegraph, but also for other pages, which I can talk about later, because that's probably a result of COVID. I also do regular slots in Delicious magazine, but over the past few years, I've probably written for all the national newspapers and magazines about food and food related topics, as well as some trade publications. I write for Coffee magazine, and a couple of local regional magazines as well. My main topics are, and it's hard to pin them down really, but I guess what I do is to write about food trends, less so now during COVID than before, because a lot of those stories might have been restaurant generated, looking at what chefs were doing, you know, the crumpet fad, if you like. I wrote about that kind of early on when everyone was doing delicious savory crumpets. That's really not what I do anymore. I write a lot about ingredients. It might be how to cook ingredients. It might be new ingredients that are just becoming available, and shedding some light on how to use them, and which chefs are using them, which restaurants are using them. Also food producers, very, very interested in food producers, but it's difficult to kind of write about producers on their own. They normally have to dovetail into another piece that I'm writing. And for Delicious magazine, I write almost very only about food and health. So I write about topical food and health issues, trying unpicking or debunking some of the wellness stuff that kind of goes on in the possibly in the tabloid newspapers, trying to unpick those claims. I can almost certainly say that none of my stories ever come directly from a PR. I'm sad to say. I get lots and lots of press releases, which most of them I'm very grateful for. If it's a new restaurant opening or a new flavor crisps or what have you, I'll file that information and I might be able to use it in a story one day. But the features I write, and they're always features, never come from a press release. So in my life, press releases are not very useful at all. That's because press releases go to everybody, and I don't want to write the same story that anybody else is writing, and neither the editors that commission me. And also those stories in the press releases won't be tailored to the publications I write for, or the kind of things that I write. And I think probably the thing that's most useful to me in terms of PRs is really having an understanding of the types of articles I write for and the publications I write for, and tailoring their approach to that. It's very time consuming. I can appreciate that, because you can't tailor make everything for every journalist. But if you do want to work with me and try to work together to get an article or a feature article in one of the publications I write for, that's pretty much the only way it's ever going to work. Because, you know, no two publications and no two food journalists are the same. We always work in different ways. I think, in fact, I tweeted about this recently, I can't remember which press release came through my inbox that prompted me to write it. But I basically said, what I need is stories, not topics. So there is no point in sending me, hey, I've got a woman who makes sourdough and she's giving sourdough classes, because that's just not a story. What I need is some kind of, you know, I hate the word journey, but it has to be some type of story that can unfold, not just about a product or a person or a restaurant. It has to be interesting. I think most of the publications I write for too are also very consumer focused, and what they want from an article that I write is something that's useful or can inform a reader so that they finish reading the piece, they then know where to go and shop for something, or how to cook for something, or get a new idea about something that they haven't tried before. So it has to be practical. I will never probably write just a plain profile of a chef, for example. So as much as I receive loads of press releases about all the amazing chefs that are doing fantastic work out there and really innovative, fantastic things, I'll never be able to place a straight interview with that person. So I guess what is useful sometimes, if PRs can perhaps think a bit more tangentially about how they can approach a story in different ways that might dovetail with a broader piece. So I was talking before about I normally write for the food pages of the Telegraph, but that has been difficult over the past few months. So I have started to write for other sections of the paper, and I've recently done a piece that hasn't actually appeared yet, that's going to appear in the interiors section of the Telegraph, because I've done a lovely piece about a North Dorset restaurant called Brassica, where the chef was very well known in his, back in the day, and his wife, who runs the business with him, is an interior designer. And they have designed this beautiful restaurant. She runs a design business on the side. He creates this wonderful cookery. So that's made a really lovely piece. But it's about food, but it's also about interiors. And I've managed to get it kind of into the paper sideways. And I would suggest that in this environment, when it's really difficult for me and for I assume other food writers, to try to figure out what on earth the food pages want at the moment. I mean, it can't all be about lentils and pulses and what we can cook from, but trying to put your finger on what is going to be useful and appeal to food editors. Kind of have to think a bit more broadly about that. I would say that approaches from PRs, it's really helpful if they can keep in mind that all the pieces I write have to have some kind of newsworthy angle. And it doesn't mean it has to be new news. It just has to be relevant or topical. So for instance, the piece I just wrote was just referring to about the restaurant. The couple who run that restaurant moved out of London several years ago to set their business up now. So with a wave of people now moving out of London, trying to seek solace or whatever in the countryside, that really dovetails beautifully with something that's happening at the moment. And that is always going to catch the eye of one of my commissioning editors if it has some kind of relevance. Be realistic, I think, is the other thing, is, as I mentioned before, writing a whole feature about your new crisp flavor, or your new olive oil, as beautiful as it might be, or even your new restaurant opening. It's just not going to happen for me, and I can only speak on my own part. So you just have to be imaginative and creative and stay on top of the news to try to figure out an angle that you can, that's going to be fresh and new and topical and dovetail with something else. So it might mean using your chef not as the main focus of a feature, but using them, I can use them as expert commentary in a piece. And I talk to chefs all the time about that, whether someone who's a specialist in fermenting, or a specialist in vinegars, or, whatever that is, that can be a really good place to kind of use the expertise of chefs and raise their profile. It might, it might not be entirely about them, but it'll incorporate them into the piece. What was I going to say? Fresh angles. Yeah, I mean, as far as actual press releases go, I mean, one thing, one pet hate which I've received a lot of recently is angling a story on how many searches it throws up on Google. Your sourdough might raise 10 gazillion Google searches, and some PRs put that as an angle for a story. That's not going to wash it for the publications I write for. It has to be something more meatier and more relevant. and I think really the only way to do that for me is to develop a relationship with me, get to know me, get to know the publications I write for, and see if we can work on projects together. I guess I'm a bit anti-press release, but that's just because it doesn't work for the papers that I write for. How am I going for time? I
think that's perfect, Sue. I mean, a quick question that someone might be asking at the moment would be, you know, this year life carries on. Let's say people pitch to you with a tailored pitch.
Yeah.
They've read where you're writing, they understand the columns. Is it okay for it to just be a couple of paragraphs pitching the idea and then maybe a couple of attachments, a picture, a press release, some stats?
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, the shorter the better, because it's the same with the commissioning editors that I write for. They don't want, you know, reams and reams. They don't have time to look at most of the stuff in their inbox, much less reams and reams. So yes, short and sharp, and don't put in the subject line or forward as if we've already had some kind of meaningful exchange about this. We haven't. So just be honest about it and make it short and sharp, and just try and get that news angle or get that angle distilled and right, so that I don't have to read to the bottom of an A4 page, you know, to get to it.
Fantastic. Okay, that's lovely. I mean, in addition to being a prolific magazine and newspaper journalist, you're also a book writer and a broadcaster. And I might bring you back in later for some questions on how food is covered in the broadcast arena, which we'll naturally cover with Tim as well. Okay, I've got Stacey to go next, and I'm just going to introduce Stacey quickly. So Stacey is a freelance journalist. She's also the founder of food, drink and travel website Crumbs. Her output appears in the likes of The Independent, The Eye, Women's Health, Cosmopolitan, BBC Good Food. She specializes in online product reviews and buying guides. And as a fun fact, she was a contributor to the BBC documentary Blood, Sweat and Takeaways, an expose of the fast food industry in Southeast Asia. And that led to an interview on Newsnight with Jeremy Paxman. But she survived that experience and she's still with us today. And I think she's also got some career news to share with our audience today as well. So Stacey, lovely to have you here, and over to you.
Thank you. What an intro. Yeah, career news wise, I moved over to the dark side or the light side. I don't know which is which. And I took a full-time gig at Hearst as their content producer, which is a new role there. So I'm writing across all their titles. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to talk about the freelance stuff, if that's okay.
Which will continue, won't it?
Sorry?
Your freelance work will continue as normal.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, so that's still continuing. So yeah, in terms of like my main outlet, as mentioned, it's probably The Independent. That's who I work with most consistently and regularly, as well as my website Crumbs. In terms of their profile, it's so wide-reaching. It really depends what I'm writing about. I specialize all food really, and spirits and wine, and occasionally a little bit of homeware if it's like got a kitchen-y focus, like I recently did bread knives, for example. But for me, it's always product guide and roundups. So it's probably quite the opposite to Sue. I am interested in new products, brands, and trends, you know, things that seem to be popping up a lot. If I'm getting lots of press releases about a certain topic, that's sort of my key to then go to my editor and say, oh, I think there could be something in this. Maybe people want to know about the 10 best of this. So, so that is quite helpful for me. My editor is great in that sense. So it kind of works. Sometimes she'll say, hey, Stace, can you do this, that, and the other? Other times she'll ask me, you know, what I'm seeing a lot of. So it's always worth, if you're a PR, if you think there is a new story or a new trend, it's worth dropping me a line, because I can always pitch that to my editor. She's fab. In terms of what I'm working on at the moment, obviously The Independent is completely online, so the lead time isn't as horrendous as some of your print titles will be. So at the moment I'm working on November, so turkeys, working my way through hundreds of turkeys, smoked salmon, that sort of thing. Obviously really seasonal topics at the moment. And then what was I going to say? In terms of how PRs can help, I do read every email I get sent, I promise. I try to reply to all of them. But even if I can't feature something in the exact, in that moment in time, as soon as I get a commission, my inbox will be the absolute first place I look. So it's just a database. So for example, if I'm looking for 10 best pink gins, I'll search my emails first and foremost. So it's worth emailing me, and I will keep it on file in that sense. I just might not be able to feature it right now. And obviously, if we've got that relationship, that's really helpful, because I kind of know to reach out to certain brands and people for certain commissions. In terms of what helps, you'd be so surprised with how many people don't include a simple link to the brand or the product. And actually, sometimes, as much as it's lovely to have a little, succinct, in a nutshell, paragraph about a brand, it is nice to just be able to click onto their website and see what they're all about. So please do include that if possible. And then, just the basics, really, like having a price and weight if relevant, or if it's food, edible food and things like that. In terms of what makes a difference, I really, really appreciate it if you're very clear and upfront about the coverage that you're after. And because I run Crumbs and I write for The Independent, they're very different. Crumbs is more London focused, and it's more restaurant reviews, or it's more London focused, a bit younger. And The Independent has to be nationwide. It has to be a product. So yeah, be clear, and I think Sue mentioned, be realistic as to what would sit in each sort of space. I think you asked in the questions, it was, how has the pandemic changed work for me? To be honest, it hasn't massively. I still get to work in my slippers, which is nice. And now the samples are just coming here instead of to the office, but I had an office before, but now I'm just at home. And so it hasn't massively changed. I think in terms of what people are looking for, we always covered a lot of subscription stuff, and that still tends to be really, really good for us on both publications. More of that, please. But I think that's I don't know if that's been helpful. That's probably all I have at the moment.
Immensely helpful, Stacey. Thank you so much. Good, that's great. And I'm sure we'll get plenty of questions for you later. Just prompting the audience as ever to deliver some questions. We've got 3 already, which is fantastic. So I'm going to turn to Ali Head. Ali, lovely to have you with us. It's now this afternoon. Great to have you on our webinar. So this is pushing out the spectrum a little bit more. So Ali is a freelance food, health and fitness journalist, which I think is great for today's needs, with years of experience under her belt, and she's a food stylist as well. She works across titles such as Women's Health, Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire, Good Housekeeping, is a stylist at BBC Good Food Show. She's always scouting the latest brunch spots, health pop-ups and food trends. And in amongst many career highlights, she's twice won the Rude Health Porridge Championships, once with umami bacon, chive oats and a soft-boiled egg. And in 2019, she repeated the feat with her oat risotto parsnips 3 ways too. But I think she wasn't this year's winner, who featured Primula cheese spread. Ali, it's lovely to have you with us this morning. Do tell our audience about your food writing world.
Yeah, so hopefully I can offer a slightly different insight. As has been said, I write across a whole range of consumer publications such as Good Housekeeping, Red, Women's Health, Marie Claire, Cosmo, Grazia. I do a little bit for the Telegraph sometimes also, but I think my world is slightly different in focus, in that I know Sue said topping a press release with this many Google searches, isn't quite right for her kind of journalism. On the other end of the spectrum, that floats so well for me. All of the content I write is kind of digital focused. As I said, I am a pretty much 100% digital journalist, and we're always kind of searching for what other people are searching for. So what we can try and make rank on Google, and what the kind of food trends are that people are actually searching for. So, for example, if you do have a statistic like that, this many people are searching, I don't know, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but at the beginning of lockdown, coffee machines or, coffee frothers, that's actually probably much more likely to land with me as a digital journalist, trying to think of what people are searching for digitally. And I'll try not to repeat anything else that has been said, but some of the really important things are just the most simple, I think. Tailoring the pitches, as Sue said, so making sure that it's concise enough but contains everything I need. The amount of pitches I get and I email back and say, I just need, you know, the name of a chef, for example, and the link that you want me to include in the article and a photo of them. And I get back the name and the link that you want to include, and then have to ask again for the image. Small things like that, I think, really set a good PR out from perhaps one who's still learning. I'm always really, really grateful when everything is kind of sent and just in my inbox, just because it makes my life a little bit easier. And I think journalists are notoriously a little bit lazy, especially digital ones. So just tailoring the pitches, making sure my name's in it, I always really appreciate. I know it's extra work, and I can't even imagine the amount of work it takes to tailor every single pitch to every single journalist, but using my name, doing your research, as it has been said, on my publication or publications in all of our instances. And also just knowing, as Sue said again, but where your brand or your product or your person could actually fit. I always really appreciate that if you kind of know where I'm writing or what I'm writing. And just, yeah, being clear and concise, as I said. If you are kind of in the keyword world or digital world and can kind of back up any statistics or kind of search metrics on the, you know, that back up what you're selling, that's always great, because that is kind of my world. And of course that the hook, which again everyone has spoken about, but I think what is really important for digital journalism at least is not just having, you know, a reason to be interested. Most of the pitches I get are interesting, but a reason why I should be interested for my specific publication at that time. It sounds so simple, it's a lot harder to do. We have to do it as journalists as well with our commissioning editors, and it is a lot harder to do than you expect. But even trying and then not getting downhearted and no, I think is important, and just building up that rapport. I really appreciate PRs who land in my inbox and who've clearly done their research, clearly know which bits I'm, you know, writing for, made sure it's relevant, and made sure it's relevant to the publications that they know I'm writing for. I think it's super important. I think also one of my absolute bugbears, but this could be just personal to me, is when a PR sends an email and attaches all of the information rather than putting it in the body of the email, because it's just another step to have to download the attachment. Again, really lazy, but I think taking out any steps that could stop a journalist from perhaps digesting the information is a really easy way to just make sure what you're sending is getting read. And don't be afraid to chase, I would say. We get so many emails, I know we all get so many emails, but just a polite nudge, more often than not, I have just missed it and would absolutely love to work together on something or discuss how we could in the future. And so just saying, did you catch that, is really helpful most of the time. And I think kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on, I think I'm probably slightly different to the other journalists on the panel in that I don't write for food pages as such. I help with the food on, or, you know, help with the food sections of publications that generally aren't food publications, is what I'm trying to say. And so if you can find a way for me that makes this amazing little niche food world, which we all love, interesting to the more general public, or, you know, if you can take me on a journey, as Sue said, give me some more colour about why people who aren't as interested in food may be interested in your personal story or product, that'll always set you apart, I think, from other people.
Delightful, Ali. Thank you so much for that. Great to have strayed into digital there. It'd be great to get some further answers on how to make a winning pitch to a digital journalist from our audience, but some great tips there. Lovely. Last, certainly not least, we have Tim Haywood. Thank you for joining us, Tim. So you need no introduction. Despite that, I will introduce you. A writer, broadcaster, restaurateur, unrepentant food geek. Well said that, man. He writes a column and criticises restaurants for the FT, and his features appear in The Guardian, Observer, Food Monthly, Delicious, Oliver Mothers. I think many of us will know him as a regular presenter on both the food programme and Kitchen Cabinet on Radio 4, where Sue also appears, and he's a multi-award winning food writer, and he's written food books including Food DIY on Smoking, Curing, Preserving, and his second book is the DIY cook, which takes a deconstructive approach to nerdy culinary classics. He's also proprietor of Fitzbilly's, where he may be joining us today, a 90-year-old bakery and restaurant in Cambridge with a delicious selection of cakes. And he's also got many years' experience in marketing, strategy, and digital and creativity activities for brands such as J. Walter Thompson, Lexis PR, and others. Tim, we were absolutely thrilled you could join us today.
It's got a Christ, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I like press releases. They don't actually work, but I like them. So if I've got a spare 20 minutes, which I occasionally do, I'll just go through them, and it's great because they're what keep us informed about the breadth of the industry. I mean, I get called upon to comment on this, and it infects everything I write, that I know what's going on in different places. So, I mean, I would never be asked to write something about food and health. It's just so off my remit, it's untrue. But every single one that comes in, I'm fascinated by. And some of them are just funny. There's a guy out there who keeps sending me press releases in which he's offering me an interview with the disruptor in the field of dog health foods. And it's like, a disruptor of the dog health food market, please, no, but it's hysterical. And that in itself still works. But sometimes, just sometimes, something will get through to me, or equally likely get through to my editor, will then fire it back to me. And then the sort of the process begins. I think since things got digital, and they've got a lot more digital and a lot more exciting, I think it's become easier to get stuff into the digital world than into print, and print's just got tougher and tougher and tougher. I think very often people forget the fact that we probably, any food writer or anybody who's appearing in any of the other food media has probably got more followers on something like Twitter or Instagram than they're ever going to get read in any of their other media. So don't think just because they're not 22 years old and with washboard abs doing yoga, they're not actually influencers, because actually, you know, there really is. There's that back end of influence, and it's often the only place we can use the information that you want to give us. You know, I can be nice about a new kind of pan in passing. I don't even need a free pan. If it looks like a good idea, I'll talk about it. But there is absolutely no way I can do that kind of cuddly informal stuff anymore through any of the media I work with. I was trying to work it out the other day. I think probably Tom Parker Bowles is about the only person I know who still has that kind of lovely old-fashioned relationship where he talks about himself, what he's talking about, and then can tack on the end, oh, by the way, this is a delightful thing I've just found, and he can get that in. The rest of us, it will be hacked out merciless if we put something like that in. I worked in PR myself, and as a result, I've got this personal thing that I just don't do trips. And I don't do junkets, and I don't do that kind of social event unless I can guarantee that I'm going to publish a story on it. So it's already taken it further down that relationship, that really key relationship element. So, you know, if a press release comes in and it's of interest, the first question will be, so can we get it exclusive? Second thing, you do understand, don't you, that if it's about a brand or a chef or a restaurant or a food product, the first thing I'm going to have to do is find your two best competitors and interview them as well and give them equal coverage, because nobody wants something that looks like a puff. So that makes it really complex. Now, if people can actually work with me on that, and I've got maybe like half a dozen favorite PRs, and they're usually somebody who's got through just once. And I think a question's come up on my right-hand side here where somebody said, how do you build that relationship? You spend, you know, 4 days on an island in Lofoten with a PR, and by the end of it, you're best mates, and it's great. And that relationship is awesome, because actually you'll never see another press release from that person ever. And then just occasionally your text lights up, and they'll go, look, this is a really weird one, and it's just coming in over the horizon. This could be just right for you or not. What do you think? And that kind of relationship just sort of builds. And I know it's a catch-22. You know, how do you get the relationship in the first place to then be able to develop it? But God, it's so valuable, because actually, you know, that person is thinking about you and understands what you're trying to put across. So yeah, I think that's really the key elements. And it's almost like I could almost write it on a sheet of A4 and send it back automatically to everybody who puts a press release to me. which is, okay, I'm going to have to talk to the competitors. This has to be something bigger than just you. And no, I won't go if you're taking 25 other people, because it invariably turns out to be, you know, they start by saying it's, you know, 3 important journalists, and it ends up by being 22 food bloggers. And it's, you know, it's just not, I can't work that way. We can't work that way, because it makes us look weak when our turnaround times may be 2 weeks behind half a dozen people putting their own photographs out there and their own stuff. And by the time it looks just tired. So exclusivity is important. I think people need to understand that we really, most of the time when we're working for the BBC radio, we're working with independent production companies, they self-edit to such an extent you wouldn't believe. So we don't even get as far as being told off for the BBC for not saying other brands are available. You know, that won't get past our individual producers at recording stage if we don't do it that way. So that's just not going to happen. The FT has Sarbanes-Oxley rules pretty much for everything, including restaurant criticism. You know, I have to declare internally if any portion of the meal was comped. I have to declare internally if I know the chef personally in any way whatsoever, just so we're covered, because the front end of the paper has to be squeaky clean. The back end can't undermine that. So that, you know, won't work that way either. But other than that, I have incredibly warm feelings towards PRs and what they're trying to do. And although I will mercilessly repeat on social media really bad spelling mistakes or hysterical pieces of business jargon, I just think that's as part of my duty to try and keep people's nose to the grindstone with good writing and good addressing and you know, properly precise stuff. But that's kind of all I can really help with, I guess. Apart from the fact that at the moment, I think there's so much that's changing. There's so much that's in flux. Whereas I used to spend most of my time either at sort of places I was reporting on or going out to see stuff that was right. I'm working entirely from home now. Most of us are generating enormous quantities of online content, often unpaid, and that stuff's sort of going out as well. And those are routes that we can get messages out. I think and even restaurant reviewing, which up till now has been hysterically tight. I mean, we use false names, false IDs to book in. We would never ever let you know we were coming. In the current climate, when nobody wants to write a bad review and nobody wants to read a bad review and no editor wants to publish a bad review, we are actually having conversations with restaurant PRs. We're approaching them and saying, we'd like to come to your restaurant. Can you please arrange a table? Because otherwise we're not going to get in. And, you know, what are the rules like? And we will not be unpleasant. I'm now running a system. I don't know if I should be saying this. A couple of us have started running this 2 ahead scheme for restaurant reviews. So I'm writing a review now for 2 restaurants ahead of where I am. If this one's crap, I won't bother writing it up and I'll go on to the next one and I'll swallow the cost of the meal. Nobody wants bad reviews right now. And I'm usually pretty positive anyway. So I don't even have to do my annual couple of stinkers, which used to be the trade secret that nobody talked about. Twice a year you've got to do, so you've got to give somebody a real kicking, otherwise nobody will take you seriously. So you usually try and pick a Gordon Ramsay place for that. But that's not going to happen this year. It's probably not going to happen next year. I think we're changing the way we operate. I suppose the other thing at the moment is one thing that will get an absolute bite from any editor anywhere is anything involving anybody who's not old, white, male, pale and stale. We're literally, editors are chewing our arms off for anything that's a bit woke. We have actually seen things that have been pitched to us on that basis openly. And it's taking advantage of that feeling. And when we've actually, we've gone halfway down the line of commissioning the story, and then we suddenly realize actually, this woman isn't a chef. She's the director of a chain of restaurants. That can't work. You've sold her to us as the mind behind this phenomenal creative operation, and it's not that. It's a big corporate, and that really that's pretty cynical. So we need to be careful of that. But I think we do want We really do want stories that are different and out of town and people from different backgrounds. That would be that really helps at the moment. That's my 2 penneth.
Great, some fantastic insights there. So just as I think Rupert mentioned earlier about be careful about sustainable, you're saying be careful about equality and diversity, because we may see through your story. Yeah,
I mean, it is an immensely powerful tool. Use it wisely, because if you just tack that onto something that turns out to be cynical, it's going to turn a lot of people off what's actually a very important thing we're doing.
Yeah. But what I took from that was it's a great time. Got a lot of restaurant PRs in the audience. It's a great time to approach Tim Haywood, because he may well be nice to you at the moment. Which is
have we got a lot of restaurant PRs in the audience?
Yes, we have. We have.
Right, well, that's okay. So I love you. You're great. Keep the information coming in. I simply can't take a free meal, or on the strength of what you've just told me, come to your restaurant. You know, you may see a booking for one of my weird aliases 2 months down the line, but you know, we cannot be public friends. It doesn't work that way. But I think it's actually probably worth talking about, because I think somebody's mentioned this on the side here. Approaches through social media are what's changing this industry massively. It used to be that we were gatekeepers for stuff like this. I'm out there all the time. You can make my screen light up and, you know, just say something nice, say hi. And you know, we can't go to bars anymore and hang out together and all get drunk, but we're out there in social media all the time. Just approach and chat. I'm a tart with my DMs. I'll open them up for anybody, and you know, you can just fine. Let's talk.
I wanted to also ask something as well. I've lost track slightly of which PRs are representing which clients. I'd actually value an up-to-date list of, because I don't know whether any restaurants are being actually represented by anybody anymore. I don't know how it's working at the moment. So I would be grateful, just for me, I don't know about anyone else, just for an up-to-date list of who your clients are. And that would be really useful next time I need someone for a story.
Yeah, that's I think that would be great if people could just keep up to date their list of clients on our site and on any kind of public forum, so that journalists can know about it. As you've raised that, I've got a similar point in reverse from Alex Scripps at Nudge, who says it's been hard during COVID with lots of changes, lots of staffers going freelance. It's actually been hard to keep track of where the freelancers are and who they're writing for. So, you know, I think I'm going to reach out to you, and we're going to reach out to more journalists to keep our audience informed about who they're writing for through updates and so on and so forth. It is an important point. So yeah, so kind of making that first impression. We've had so many questions on that. Kate Alders from the Saloon Club. I've got a cake maker. Sorry, let me just find the person's name. Chinola Awa from Good Cake Day. Natalie Trice and others who are saying, how do we make that first impression with you? Maybe for some of the panel, it is social media at the moment. Maybe it's a pitching email. What would anyone like to suggest? Ali, what are your thoughts on that?
Will you repeat that? Sorry, my Wi-Fi went. This is the joy of live.
How do people make a first impression with you?
Okay, good question.
Something you've never heard of.
I think, as Tim said, social media can be an invaluable tool. It's a fine line between being like, oh, that's lovely to connect, and slight invasion of, there are the right ways, I think, to say hi. You know, if we're showcasing work or sharing articles or anything, just, you know, even if we work together on an article, I really like it when people kind of tag me in the, you know, the agencies tag me in sharing it, so then we're kind of connected on that platform, or even just reaching out. I've had a lot of emails actually over the past few weeks just saying, this is who I am, an updated list, as Sue said, of who you're representing and kind of how we could work together. I think it's invaluable, and it all gets filed, and then yeah, as was mentioned, you just search back through and hopefully work together on something in the future.
Fantastic. So as a digital journalist, social mentions work well with you, and social connection. Stacey, what works well with you?
I would say personally, a DM gets lost for me. I'll never see it again. So please email me rather than get in touch on Insta. I love connecting on Instagram, and it's really, really nice. And I found loads of amazing new brands that way. And it's lovely to build relationships that way, but please do not try and send me all the information that would normally be in a press release. via a DM, it will just get lost for me.
Okay. Sue, anything you'd like to add there about how do people
No,
get
just because
noticed?
I'm slightly, I mean, I am with Tim. You know, as I said earlier, I like press releases because I can file them away and I know which restaurants are opening because you can't keep track, and the latest flavor crisps and what have you. But if you want to try and work with me, just send me an email to me, you know, just to me saying, hi, who you represent. Let's try and, you know, get some kind of digital relationship going. So that we can get a bit of a sense of each other. I think the first sending a press release and hoping that I'll kind of get back in touch is, I just, there's just too many for that. So make a personal approach. Tell me who you work for. Let's try and work together, build a relationship. That works for me.
Okay. Aaron Vaughan at Roche Communications says, you are inundated with new product ideas left, right and centre. Do any of you have any tips on how PRs can get noticed? I mean, the product will speak for itself and will, you know, survive on its own merits, but are there any tips in their initial approach for how to pitch a product to you? Tim, could you start with that one?
I don't really think there's anything that makes it, anything that comes as a release is, it's like an old-fashioned version of a feed. It's just sitting there like chuntering away in the corner. And I give it about as much attention as I would a cat. So, occasionally go over and interact with it, but generally speaking, otherwise it's sort of a warm, live thing going in the corner. I don't think things jump out. I think we go back to them. We go through it when we've got time, like a slush pile, and it's there to keep us informed. No, I don't mean this to sound rude, but I don't know who you are when you write a press release, so I sort of don't care. If you
say earlier that you can get tickled by humour, so people who
I get tickled by humour, but it would be better if you've got something that you really think fits me, then come round the press release. And I'm open, I'm friendly, I'm a nice bloke. You know, there's got to be some way that you can actually go direct and go, look, I think this might be of interest to you. If you do that twice. Even if I can't sell the story, then I thought it was good enough to take it last time. If you come back to me with one as good as that, that's great. Yeah, come back next time. And that, you know, the relationship is there. I've got great relationships with people, by the way, I've never done a story for, but we've pitched 2 or 3 stories together and they've been rejected together, and we all understand why. And that's kind of nice. Those are good people.
A question for you and Sue. With broadcast, are you sometimes acting as an ambassador for a story from a PR and taking them to Radio 4, or do they tend to tell you what you're covering?
I don't work much for Radio 4. I kind of go on Sunday brunch occasionally and do product stuff, but in my experience of it, and it's reasonably limited. No, absolutely not. We come up with an idea with the producers, and we decide that it will be olive oil, and then I'll go out and put a lot of research into finding the olive oils that I'll like, and then I'll try and find the PR to get hold of, because I need quite a lot of it to get hold of it. So no, but having said that, it's just that they're always looking for ideas. You know, it's like newspapers. They start the day with an empty page, so they've got to fill it with something. But it's a question of, you know, approaching them sensibly with the right products that fit, you know, that fit Sunday brunch, for example. They're not going to use everything on Sunday brunch, but and then make the personal approach. Don't just send a press release. So, you know, again, that's all I could say. Build that relationship with the people who make the decisions.
Yeah, and Tim, is it worth pitching to you for the food program?
Food program, not so much anymore. I guess because I work both sides of this one, I often find myself in sort of the negotiating position between the PR and the partner. This is true of the FT, and it always has been true of the food program. I haven't done much for them in the last few months, so I'm not so sure if that still is. But there's a really weird situation where they say they just don't want to be involved with PRs. Yeah. But they've got absolutely no budget whatsoever for travel or anything even vaguely interesting. So one of the things you'll notice about the food program, for example, is they're trying to find more and more and more interesting stories in Bristol, because that's where they all live. I mean, and literally, those guys have got so little sodding money, it's absolutely impossible. Yeah. But then somebody approaches me and says, you know, as somebody did recently, we'll fly you and a crew out to Italy to the olive oil harvest. And so I'm saying, okay, guys, here is budget to do this thing, But you guys, you do understand, don't you, that we can't even mention your product name in it. So how are we going to make the story work so this reflects well on you? And by that point, you know, we're in that relationship. It's working. I'm kind of on your side. I want to do that trip. I want to sell that story. And the only way they're going to be able to do anything like that, and the only way they're ever going to be able to afford a plane again, is if somebody stumps up from a PR agency. But we are still very, very much doing this negotiating thing that's only half acknowledged by the publisher.
Stacey, on a similar tack for you, Claire Pope from Hoot and Holler PR, which wins the award for best PR company name today. She says, with product launches in mind, what is a good way to make something really stand out with you?
I think for me, check to see if it's something that I've written about before, even in the broadest sense. And then check to see if it's been really recently, because if it has, then I'm probably not going to be able to do it again. Not to say don't email me, like I say, I'll always refer back to that, but don't expect me to be able to do it immediately. And just try and have an angle. Like at the moment, I'm inundated with coffee subscriptions. I probably have been sent 100 of them, no exaggeration, and they all sound wonderful, but I'm only going to be able to write about a couple, you know? So what is like the need to know for me? That's it, really.
Okay, and Ali, any thoughts from you there?
I think exactly what Stacey said, finding the right angle. And also, I don't know if every journalist would agree with this, but certainly for me, I do a lot of, similar to Stacey, I think, but roundups of, for example, the best coffee subscriptions. Say I wrote that this time last year and we hadn't updated it on any of the sites that I write for. I think I'd actually really appreciate if a brand or a PR came to me with a coffee subscription and they'd taken the time to find that article that I'd written, flagged that it's off my radar and I haven't updated it for a long time, and just said, here are some interesting things about our new release, or some interesting things which make it relevant right now. Would you consider updating it? I think just bringing to my attention a way it could work, or even just showing that you've done that kind of research is really, really super helpful.
I would second that. I love it when people do that.
I would third that. I once got a piece in the Guardian about alternative milks back in the day when, you know, this was all new, and the PR actually did all my research. She told me which milks were available where, you know, it made life so easy. And of course, you know, her brand was in there as well, but it just made life really easy, and it was a great piece in the end. So yeah, and you can't afford to do that for every journalist, of course, but it does work.
We have unanimity. So Charlotte Wright at Rooster PR says, and your answer may be different for each of you here, would you consider covering brands that are only available via their own online site or limited stockists, or do you always need the endorsement of a supermarket for you to take notice? Sue?
No, I mean, it has to be, if I'm writing for the Telegraph or Delicious, it has to be available nationally. But I can't imagine what brand doesn't have a website and can't arrange that. No, definitely not. And the more interesting, the better. So, you know, if it's not at a supermarket, that's fine, but it has to be available.
Fantastic. Tim?
It doesn't really affect me, I'm afraid. I mean, by the time I get down to sort of individual product level, I don't really have that much where I can place it.
Okay, that's great.
On that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, do please.
For kind of, I'd say Hearst in particular, but lots of the other kind of consumer publications, the sad truth is it really does matter whether it's stocked at, say, basically all of the links that they're kind of using digitally now, they're making affiliate revenue from. So if you are a tiny independent, you know, company that wants to get featured, they'll feature a handful in a roundup, but the majority of I'd say journalists tend to sway towards the bigger brands, and it's a shame, I think, because it isn't how it should be, but 9 times out of 10 if you go through a roundup now that we've written online of things, most of them will be links pulled in from Waitrose or Sainsbury's or somewhere where they can make a little bit of profit too. And I wouldn't say it would hinder you, I just would say that the chances, if you look at kind of percentages of how many products they feature from the bigger names and how many products they feature from the smaller independents, there is definitely a difference. Yeah.
Okay, Lorna at Surge Communications wants to know whether COVID is affecting the way you're writing about Christmas from your own individual sector of the food and drinks market. So, Stacey, is COVID in the way you're planning your stories, or are you writing it Christmas as usual?
It's not Christmas as usual. I think people are, it's in the back of my mind, certainly when I write, to talk about turkeys again. I'm going to be bloody sick of them by the time December comes around. But yeah, you might not want one that feeds 20 people this year, right? We're looking at smaller cuts and different things and clever ways. But every year I always like to write about what's new. So anything that's new for 2020, COVID related or not, is always a good thing to include for me.
Okay. Sue, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just did a piece for Delicious, or it's actually out in the November issue, because they do two Christmas issues. They do one in November and December, and it was just it wasn't really about food per se. It was more about how on earth are we going to make Christmas joyful when it's going to be so different. I mean, it wasn't how on earth. Here are some fantastic ways to make Christmas joyful. So I think, the focus is on celebratory. Everybody wants to celebrate it, but it's not going to be the same. We're not going to be able to go to the Christmas pantomimes. We're not going to be able to do a few bits and pieces. So, I was trying to come up with other ways to inject, joy and replace that Christmas pantomime with something else innovative, bearing in mind that people might be on tough budgets, bearing in mind that people can't visit, do the things they normally do, come up with some interesting ideas. I think that's probably was the key to kind of getting that piece done.
Okay. Tim, any thoughts on that one?
Basically, most of the stuff that I'm working on now with Christmas in mind is on precisely that basis, which is we know it's going to be miserable for everybody. But it's not stuff that's likely to recommend specific brands unless somebody's doing something really, really clever. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm on at the moment. Okay.
Some specific ones here. So Louise Barnett, PR, will you be writing about vegan products in Veganuary? She says because she is promoting a new vegan cheese called She's, and also a vegan organic soup and sauces brand called Tidefoot. So Ali, do you get involved in Veganuary?
I have done, yeah, for the past kind of couple of years, and I would say for the publications I write for, I think we did Big Guides to Veganuary in like maybe 2018, a good few years ago now. So that is actually quite a good example, I would say, of don't lead with Veganuary, we've written about it. Lead with the vegan cheese. If we haven't done a vegan cheese roundup or even explored what a vegan cheese is, that's more interesting. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that I could consider covering for Women's Health, or one of the more kind of health focused brands, but just perhaps with a slightly different angle, different approach.
Stacey, would that be one for you for the Independent, the Eye, etc.?
Yeah, we tend to cover all of that stuff, but like you said, it's good to have a new angle because you just feel like you've written about it 100 times already. Yeah. I think with the Independent, as Ali mentioned, it does have to make money. So not everything's going to have an affiliate link, and that's fine. And one of the best bits about this job is showcasing some smaller brands. I absolutely adore that part of it. But how likely are people going to buy a cheese product singular online? I don't know. Like, it has to, if it needs to pass that test for me to feature it, really.
Okay, and I've got one from Polly Robinson. She wants to know whether any of you are willing to do visits at the moment. So Tim, you're absolutely willing to do visits, and so long as they're exclusives and so forth, that's fine with you.
And also on the understanding that I'll do it if I can sell the story at the far end of it. That's it. That's exactly it. I mean, otherwise, there used to be a lovely thing with Tabasco, where they used to take a dozen journalists every year and give the most fantastic time in New Orleans for a week. Yeah. And nobody ever wrote a story out about Tabasco as a result of it, but nobody will ever say anything bad about Tabasco. And I think that's been an absolutely brilliant sort of example of a particular kind of PR. I just think at the best of times, I don't want to go with 20 other journalists and get pissed on your ticket. And now you'd be mad to even think about it. No, it's I will travel professionally to go and do that story if we've already sold it and made it work. But the promise of flying out there with a bunch of other journalists, on the basis of then selling the story afterwards, no, not going to happen.
Even with free Tabasco?
I'll write about Tabasco.
There are other sources are available.
And Ali and Stacey, will you go to do visits at the moment, or is that not part of your writing?
Yeah, I was due to go to Italy next week actually, but it's sadly been cancelled like everything else in 2020. And but yeah, no, I love it. I love that part of it. Restaurant visits are still very much go. Yeah, all good.
I would say the same thing too, but like Tim, it has to be really well targeted. I'm fully aware. I'm not interested in taking freebies from restaurants that are struggling or producers that are struggling. I'm really not interested in doing that. If we can work together to get a story that the publication I write for is really interesting and they're interested in, I'll definitely, absolutely, but not just, a junket for the sake of it. Absolutely not.
I think COVID has really changed that, because actually now I think journalists have to be more clear, and PRs also, on what coverage they want to get out of stuff and what you're doing things for. If you're sending me a product, I want to know where I can feature it, exactly as everyone said. And that extends to trips too. Like, everyone's kind of reassessed how they spend their time, I think, as we're all working a lot more. And yeah, exactly what everyone else has said. Open to ideas, but only if they can then turn into something that will kind of, benefit my publications.
Yeah, a nice question to end on. This is slightly off topic, but we've got a PR here, Rosie Ferrer, who says, as a PR who really wants to move over to the writing side with a focus on food, drink and lifestyle, do you have any advice to someone who would love to transition into your world? Can we quickly give Rosie some advice? A top tip? Ali, maybe start with you.
Have another source.
My kind of is probably quite far reaching. I did my MA in magazine journalism at City, and I know a few of my friends who were working in PR last year have just started the course this year. So that's obviously a much bigger step than doing it yourself. It's a lot of money and time and effort, but the skills that I learned were invaluable, and I think it's one of the best courses you can possibly do, just to learn everything, really cut your teeth in what it takes to be a food journalist, proved my point well. Other than that, I think I'll hand over to other people.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Sue, do you have some advice for Rosie?
I mean, I just don't want to be down about it, but it's so hard to earn a living from food writing at the moment. You think of freelancing as like a jigsaw puzzle or a quilt. You have to have a million pieces to your income, and otherwise, if you don't have to pay the mortgage, that's great. If you do, it's very challenging. As Tim was saying before we came on, the fees that you get for the pieces that you write, it is fallen over all the years I've been in. It's just gone down and down and down. It's very hard to make a living. So make sure it's not your sole source of income is all I could suggest.
I think that's really good advice, actually. Yeah, I mean, I started with a blog, and one of those horrible bloggers, but and then moved over to like the Independent and stuff like that afterwards, and it was really great to just keep practicing writing. So I'm not a trained journalist like the rest of you, but it's been a great in, and without that I wouldn't have had any visibility, I suppose. So that's been really good. And yeah, I very much did it as a side thing and built it up. I could never have gone straight into freelance writing solely. I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage. So yeah, that's good advice, I think.
I'd mirror that completely. I think it's not just that you also need other forms of income. It's the stuff that you have to do that is for exposure or for sort of synergies. You've got to have other things to synergize with. I probably can't monetize my exposure in any way on the bottom line of the restaurant, but at least I can convince myself when I'm turning up to do, another event where I'm talking for nothing, that, that might possibly be something that will go on the marketing line in the restaurant. It won't, but it makes me feel better about what I'm doing. So we do, I think, a portfolio of stuff. Fortunately, I think also most of us are more general content mongers than we've ever been before. We're turning our hand to all kinds of media, putting all kinds of stuff out, and that's good. Fantastic.
Can I ask our audience to all go out and purchase Tim's books now? That would be really, really, really nice. So I've got and Sue as well. So is the panel okay if we just keep going for 5 more minutes? Is that okay?
Fine with me. Yep.
I've got a couple of quick questions, and then a longer one. I'll give you the longer one now. You should give some thought to it. And we'll finish on this one. It's Corrine Corridus from Talker Taylor PR. What are the best brand stories, PR campaigns that you've seen in this year, whether COVID or not? And we'll come back to that a little bit later. And then a couple of quick ones. Could you just wave if you're at all interested, so that the PR can maybe contact you afterwards? I've got Demi Pereira at Fernway PR. Do we have any panelists interested in Ayurvedic superfood powders? Do we get any waves for Ayurvedic superfood powders?
I'm going to say maybe.
A possible maybe wave from Ali there. That's fantastic. I've got Beverly Bergman. Anyone interested in street food in general?
Yeah.
Maybe Stacey on that. Okay. I think those are the kind of quick questions that I can ask. So can we just finish off?
I've got a question.
Yeah, Tim.
If all of us are actually promoting our brands, why aren't any of the PRs offering to PR us? It's an interesting quid pro quo, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the relationship could go two ways. So yeah, hey, PR some journalists.
Yeah. Answers to Food4Media on that one. In fact, do a tweet or an Instagram post. That would be lovely. So let's finish on that question. Do the members of the panel have any thoughts about PR campaigns that have really stood out for them this year? Maybe created a good feeling or been memorable or got them to notice that PR company, no matter how big or small the story might be. Who would like to start on that question?
I've got one.
Stacey.
Well, it's not so much. Well, no, it is. Yeah. So obviously, normally you do Christmas in July, and you walk around half of London, and you get plied with booze, and try the whole Christmas range, which is great. But this year, obviously, everyone had to think outside the box, and it's been so interesting. And Iceland really, really, really impressed me with how they approach things. I got sent a humongous box. All the packaging was sustainable, and which I really appreciate. I get sent so much stuff, and I feel terrible. So please do send it sustainably if you can. But anyway, they sent me this great big box, and rather than sending me, an entire turkey, God, I talk about turkeys way too much. Oh, and salmon and all of this stuff. They sent a tiny, like beautifully, it's like something from a Michelin star restaurant in each pot, and we did a virtual cook along, and it was so much fun. And they also included, I think they what was it when you sponsor a penguin? They did that for each of us as well, and it just was really heartwarming, but also a really clever use of, there was no waste. We tried everything we needed in the comfort of our own home. It was memorable. I'm going to write about a number of those things now. It just ticked all the boxes for me.
Nice
it was
work.
really well done.
Nice work, Iceland. Anyone else with a memory from this year?
I think the ones that really stand out for me are people where restaurants or restaurant groups have handled online PR particularly well. I think the guys at Hawksmoor have paid an absolute blinder, right? And they've leveraged COVID to look more brilliant. They're so good, but they are all over it. I think the Quo Vadis group or the Barafina group, who've actually got a full-time PR on staff, and she is brilliant. And nothing goes on in that place that we don't know about and feel warm about. And the relationships there are particularly good. A couple of young guys who set up a pizza operation that's in Soho somewhere, forgotten the name of it, Pizza Brothers, they're great. I mean, they are talking all the time and being out there all the time and building and running that relationship. And that's worth more. When they've got something to say, that's worth more than 1,000 press releases. No matter how well campaigned or organized they are, that's what really, really cuts through.
Sue.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's not really a branding campaign, but the Cook for Syria kind of charity fundraising campaign, I just think is a model of fantastic PR. It combined, Clerkenwell Boy and and one of the big food PR agencies, you know, just did everything. They tackled social media, they did events, they did a cookbook, they were constantly there, constantly aware, without shoving it down anybody's neck. It just made you want to be part of it. It was joyful, it was for a good cause, and it was really well done. If you look at the hashtag Cook for Syria, you'll kind of see what I mean. Fantastic campaign, PR campaign.
That's very good to hear. And Ali, lastly.
Again, similar to Sue, it's not actually a campaign, but I just think it's a really good example of a restaurant handling their kind of interactions well. Lupin's, which is in kind of Tower Bridge, London Bridge way, is run by two really amazing ladies, and I happened to have been in the weekend that we kind of locked down, off my own back, one of my own accord, and just got talking to them and exchanged, gave them my card, and she's just kind of checked in there, but it's been no kind of branding, no campaign as such, but she just kept me updated, as I'm sure she does with lots of other journalists who she has a rapport with, but kept me updated with what they were doing. And it actually led to, so they did a lot of Deliveroo meals for NHS workers and kind of, you know, campaigns like that, which I had hundreds of emails about. But the way she approached, kind of, she always checked in a very personal way and was just, I think, quite clever with how they positioned themselves as a brand. And they always spring to mind now if I ever write a roundup of best restaurants to go to, or you know, have to think of one to recommend. I just think it was carefully handled, and I now have a good relationship with them enough for them to always be my kind of go-to. So yeah.
So some great PR strategies and just memorable campaigns at difficult times for us all. Thanks for the question, Corinne. That was excellent. Well, you, as they say in all the best game shows, you have been smashing contestants. Can't thank you enough. I've learned so much today, I have to say, filling gaps in my knowledge. It's been immensely enjoyable. Thank you for joining us. So just say goodbye to everyone now and we'll finish. Thank you, Ali Head. Thank you, Sue Quinn. Thanks, Tim Haywood. Thank you, Stacey Smith. It's been really brilliant. And to you, our audience, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.